But most of them are not pioneers. They were here much later. And the burials continued here until 1937. This is a little misleading. Something like 315 LDS were buried in this cemetery. And most of those burials were in the warm weather. You know how it is when you go back to school in the fall, lots of sickness. That's the way it was here. Late summer, September, August and September, lots of illness. So then you get into the cold months, and then there are relatively few deaths. There are little historical problems that we're dealing with. The church historian's office now has admitted that there were 300 and some who died here, not over 600. Thomas L. Kane, our great friend, is the one, I think, who started us down the path of more than 600 being buried in that cemetery by the Missouri River. And that cemetery is this cemetery. He, in 1850, made an address to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, and it made the church look so good that some wealthy members of the church said, "We will pay if you will print this and circulate it to members of the administration, to leading senators, and to newspapers, which would give them a totally different picture of the church than they had had." And Thomas L. Kane said, "I will do that if one of your church members will help me edit it." I think that editing was done by who was the early representative of the church in Bernheisel? Dr. Bernheisel. I think that's the case. At any rate, footnoted on the address that was given to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania was the statement that 600 were buried in the cemetery, that cemetery by the Missouri River, referring to this cemetery. And a lot of historians, like I, accepted what Thomas L. Kane said about where the Mormon Battalion farewell ball was held. Others accepted what he said about the number of deaths. And this became, you know, you drive around, you see a lot of churches with a cross on it. If they've got a cross on it, it says everything about their church. If they don't know anything else, they know about the cross. Well, with a lot of people, what they know about winter quarters is 600 died and were buried there. I met a woman up at summer quarters the other day and talked with her, and she shook her head and said, "Those poor people at winter quarters." You know, and that's the theme that was used for decades and decades by the church. That people suffered terribly here. Whereas the fact is, the church built an enormous number of significant buildings. All these communities, roads, bridges, ferries, organized quite a number of counties, governments, and established a major trail which was later borrowed by California gold rushers, Colorado gold rushers, Montana gold rushers, by many who were going to Oregon, and it became the pattern for the Union Pacific Railroad. They chose effectively the same route that the Mormons did. So these pioneers did a very significant amount of work here. They weren't all suffering. Some did, and some of us yet today, we suffer. So you have to keep in mind, keep in perspective, that it was a very productive time here, very productive. And when the LDS left their communities and went west, can you imagine the heavy debt they left here for people to pay off, for all the roads, bridges, and ferries, and governments, and courthouses, and all that? There was not a dime left for anybody to pay. It was all paid off. So, the, there are things here that need to be changed, but they're quote-unquote historic. So we're going to keep them. Let's go up now.